Discover the amazing power of gratitude. 7 unexpected ways it transforms lives. Forever. Rachel stood in her empty kitchen, sunlight filtering through dusty blinds like the warmth of Jake's smile that used to illuminate their home. The bills piled high on the counter, menacing in their reminder of the financial chaos she now faced. It had been 6 months, yet the wound felt raw, like a freshly torn bandage. As an elementary school teacher in a small Midwestern town, the pressure to maintain her facade of normalcy felt suffocating. The judgmental whispers of her colleagues echoed in her mind. How could they think she'd be up to the task of teaching, let alone raising 2 young children on her own? The afternoon dragged on, heavy with the weight of her thoughts. She glanced at the stack of papers that required grading but couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy settling in her chest. Was she really capable of being the mother and teacher that her kids needed? In those moments of despair, the isolation became palpable. She felt stranded in her grief while the world continued to spin around her, dismissing her struggles as mere gossip material. Just as she slipped deeper into the shadows of doubt, the doorbell rang. It was Mr. Thompson, her elderly neighbor, with a face brightened by an infectious smile. "Rachel, I'm starting a community garden project," he announced with enthusiasm, "and I'd love your help." The idea felt like a far-off dream. Her hands were already full. Part of her wanted to decline, to retreat into her bubble of obligation and grief. Yet something about his genuine excitement sparked a flicker of intrigue. Maybe just a little help, she heard herself say, surprising herself as if someone else had responded for her. Together, they dug into the soil, planting seeds that stirred something within her. As the earthy scent filled the air, she began to share her story, the joyous laughter their family had known, the abrupt silence left in Jake's absence, and the heavy burden of being a single mother. Mr. Thompson listened, his eyes compassionate. His own past filled with loss unfolded between the rows of freshly planted seeds. But even amid this fragile healing, trouble brewed at home. When her youngest child fell ill, terror gripped her heart. Panic-stricken, she hovered by his bedside, racked with the agony of wanting to hold him close while fearing the looming weight of school responsibilities. Days blurred, and Rachel's mind raced, questioning how she could prioritize tasks when her child's well-being hung in the balance. Should she continue planning lessons or focus on what truly mattered? This moral tug-of-war ignited a tempest inside her, leaving each decision an unsolvable puzzle. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Rachel stood teetering on the edge of her unraveling world, she contemplated finding a new definition of success, one that encompassed gratitude rather than just busyness. But in that moment of potential clarity was the suffocating fear of judgment from her townspeople, who seemed eager to relish her faltering. Would they see her attempts to honor Jake's memory through this newfound perspective? Or would they only recognize the cracks in her facade? The event loomed near, and within her mind, uncertainty raged like a wildfire. In this penetrable silence, she envisioned herself confronting the very people who doubted her capabilities, a fraying rope threatening to snap. Was sharing the fruits of her experience too vulnerable a risk? As vulnerability loomed larger, her heart raced, filling her with doubt about whether she would resolve to step into the light or disappear, swallowed by the darkness. The stakes had never been this high, and all she could do was brace for the storm ahead. Rachel stared blankly at the walls of her home, each bare surface echoing the emptiness she felt inside. A faint flicker of purpose came from tending to the garden, yet that light dimmed when she looked at her child, nestled under blankets, feverish and restless. The choices loomed larger each passing minute, compounding her anxiety while she wrestled with the weight of responsibility. The room felt stifling as she grappled with uncertainties, wishing to slide her hand under her son's head, to feel the warmth of his small body against hers. yet recognizing that her lesson plans begged for attention. The desires whispered of failure if she faltered here. Would that be the beginning of everything falling apart? Maybe I can find a way to do both, Rachel muttered to herself quietly, the words merely a thread of hope rising above her doubts. Could she balance the duties she carried as both mother and teacher? This question played relentlessly in her mind, and she began to think about alternatives. Days shifted like the seasons, her child gradually regaining strength with each waking moment, while Rachel's own convalescence took a different form. Rather than standard lesson outlines that felt monotonous, she envisioned crafting engaging stories from their real-life experiences, allowing the children in her class to understand the breadth of joy and sorrow. She would no longer shy away from her vulnerability. That was how she could teach, by weaving herself into the narrative. The realization unfurled like petals in spring. She could transform her pain into a teaching moment, ultimately using it to connect with her students. Rachel felt emboldened, imagining standing in front of the classroom, recounting tales of moments that mattered deeply not just in her life, but for the lives of children navigating their own challenges. By weaving her sorrow into the curriculum, she could be a beacon of understanding, a lesson realized through personal discovery. The prospect overshadowed her with warmth, casting a ray of comfort over her lingering fear. But as much as she wanted to frame her new approach, the looming judgments of her surroundings continued to nag at her psyche. Could the whispers of her colleagues be muffled by the power of connection and shared human experience? Carrying this confidence into the classroom, she prepared to unearth narratives that could compel, inspire, and reinvigorate her students. The idea energized her. Yet in the shadows of her determination hung the question. Was the community ready to embrace this initiative? Would her colleagues scoff at her revelations? The day arrived for her first session back, and the familiar sensation of apprehension clutched her stomach tightly as she stepped into the classroom. She took a deep breath, aware of the attentive eyes surveying her, anticipating the fate of their interactions. This was her moment of test, a chance to rewrite the narrative not just for them, but for herself. With trembling hands, she gathered her notes, drawing deep inspiration from the garden she had cultivated with Mr. Thompson. She simply had to begin. Flashes of doubt clouded her resolve. What if their reactions dimmed her light? What if they remained indifferent to her story? As the children filtered into the room, she weighed the gravity of the choice she was about to make: speak from the heart and share her journey, or retreat into the protective cocoon of anonymity. It was a decision that could either forge connections or reinforce the chasm of isolation she knew all too well. Just as she prepared to open her mouth, a voice pierced through the clamor. "Miss Rachel, is it true your husband passed away?" It was a childish, innocent inquiry, raw and unguarded, and her heart seized as awe-filled eyes turned toward her, waiting for her response. This was her moment, but could she find the strength to face what came next? Or would the memories of fear and judgment swallow her whole once again? Rachel's heart raced, a thunderous drum echoing through the silence that followed the child's question. She felt exposed, stripped of the protective layers she had cautiously wrapped around her heart. For a fleeting moment, the room blurred as the weight of loss threatened to envelop her again. Flashes of her husband's laughter danced across her mind, then quickly extinguished under the chill of reality. "Ah, yes," she managed to breathe out, her voice surprisingly steady. The acceptance hung in the air, a fragile moment that felt both liberating and suffocating. In that instant, she cast her gaze around the classroom, absorbing the wide-eyed curiosity etched on the children's faces. This was no longer just about her story. It was an opportunity. The sight of their innocence sparked something deep within her, a flicker that demanded she push past the discomfort. "Can I share some stories with you?" The question fell from her lips unfiltered, fueled by the resolve to transform her pain. She hadn't outlined this pivot, but the moment demanded authenticity more than preparation. With a collective nod, eager eyes encouraged her to continue. Rachel took a breath, recalling the garden story she had once envisioned. "I want to tell you about the garden we grew," she began, her voice brightening at the memory. At first, the soil seemed empty, just dirt. But with care and patience, flowers began to bloom, just like our lives can change with love. As she spoke, Rachel felt the heaviness ease, the act of embracing vulnerability granting her unexpected strength. She transitioned from the garden to moments of joy shared with her son, and the adventures they crafted together despite their loss. In weaving these tales, she realized the power her struggle held, not just as a teacher, but as a bridge to her students' experiences. But as her confidence grew, so too did the stirring doubts. Pulsing shadows lingered, asking whether the acceptance would extend beyond the classroom. Would these children understand? Would her colleagues appreciate this shift from traditional teaching methods? During the break that followed, the children buzzed with their own revelations, scattered discussions erupting about family stories and personal experiences. Rachel smiled at their excitement, yet deep within, uncertainty gnawed at her. The picnic table where she sat felt too exposed. She had shared her truth, but was she ready for any judgment from her peers? As the bell rang signaling the end of the day, Rachel sighed, relishing a moment of quiet reflection. What she had assumed was going to be a potentially painful experience had unveiled an unexpected connection not just with her students but within her own heart. The ceremony of shared stories turned into a precious exchange of understanding, and she considered how this would transform the classroom dynamics. The tumult of her emotions blended into a kaleidoscope of realization. Perhaps this newfound approach could ripple into change, could invigorate a culture of acceptance in her school. What started as anxiety over disclosing her personal life morphed into a powerful strategy that could benefit others. Yet, as she gathered her belongings, one thought resonated above the others. Would her colleagues accept this shift or dismantle it? The moment she stepped into the school hallway, she spotted Sarah, her sometimes critical colleague, standing in a huddle with a few teachers. Rachel's heart sank. Sarah's sharp gaze landed on her, curiosity mingling with a hint of disbelief. Rachel felt the moment freeze, the potential judgment hanging in the air, as she braced herself for what was to come. She was no longer just a teacher. She was a woman stepping into her truth, ready to confront the judgments that loomed ahead. Would this bold step ignite a transformative journey within her teaching community? Or would it reveal deeper, more challenging struggles yet to unfold? Rachel steadied herself, forcing a calmness into her breath as she approached the small group of teachers. Sarah, with her arms crossed, looked as imposing as ever. The air simmered with unspoken words, the kind that hung between colleagues who knew each other too well. "Hey Rachel," Sarah said, her voice dripping with casual curiosity, yet laced with an edge. "I heard you had an interesting day in class." The other teachers glanced at Rachel, and she felt the subtle shift in their energy. It was a mixture of intrigue and apprehension, the kind of response that made her skin crawl. Just moments before, she had felt liberated by her storytelling, and now doubt trickled in. "Yeah," Rachel replied, trying to keep her tone light, but her heart raced anew, and she could almost feel its pulse in her throat. The words she had shared felt precious, and she was suddenly guarding them. It was different. The kids really connected with it. "Oh?" Sarah raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced, a small smirk playing at the corners of her lips. "You mean you actually revealed something personal to them?" It was a challenge, a subtle barb disguised as curiosity. Rachel could sense the disapproval just beneath the surface. "Not everything," Rachel said, the words spilling out before she could consider their weight. "I told them about finding beauty in loss, how stories can grow like a garden." The moment she mentioned the garden, she felt the warmth of the recollection, a small pivot in her confidence. Sarah's expression shifted. The smirk faltered, revealing a flicker of something like interest. "Interesting analogy," she said, the slightest hint of respect mingling with skepticism. Instinctively, Rachel knew that this conversation was pivotal. Would it end here with an eye roll, or could it lead to something deeper? "Why would you do that?" Sarah pressed, her tone shifting again, probing for vulnerability. "Kids need structure. They might not get it, you know?" The challenge ignited a fire in Rachel. But these experiences are part of life. Isn't it important for them to understand that they're not alone in their struggles? To share that there's beauty even in pain? The words hung between them like a promise. Rachel felt empowered, her resolve firming with each breath. The surroundings seemed to fade, all noise muffled as Rachel's controlled narrative broke through her self-imposed boundaries. What if they carry those seeds of understanding into their own lives? SNT that how growth happens? The other teachers listened, and Rachel could see the moment when Sarah realized this wasn't just about one woman's reluctance to hide behind a textbook anymore. This was a movement, a reaction against the status quo. There was hesitation in Sarah's eyes, a flicker of consideration that ignited hope within Rachel. Maybe there's room to explore this, Sarah conceded slowly. But it won't be easy. This isn't just about stories, Rachel. A sense of urgency coursed through Rachel's veins as she considered the ripple effect of her words. This was a conversation that could redefine not just her teaching, but the very fabric of their school's culture. I'm ready for it to be challenging, Rachel declared, her heart beating steadily now, reflecting the determination that had emerged. I want to see if we can change what education looks like here. As Rachel stepped away, the weight of their exchange lingered in her mind, buzzing with potential. She had awakened a new resolve, yet the reality of confronting systemic inertia loomed large. Will Sarah's tentative acceptance blossom into broader support, or will Rachel face an uphill battle against her colleagues' resistance to change? The stakes had risen, and the challenge had just begun. Rachel returned to her classroom, her pulse still racing from the encounter with Sarah. Each step echoed her commitment to change, a determination that had bloomed amongst the thorns of doubt. The bright posters on the walls, colored by the laughter of her students, contrasted sharply with the weight that had settled on her shoulders. Becoming an advocate for storytelling in education was not merely an aspiration. It was becoming part of her identity. As the day wore on, Rachel couldn't rid herself of Sarah's scrutinizing gaze. She could almost feel the implications of the conversation pressing into her skin, an unyielding reminder of the journey she had initiated. An unsettling thought clawed at her. What if she failed? The specter of her past insecurities crept back, whispering sabotaging doubts. Yet, as she scanned through the animated faces of her students, the whispers faded, replaced by a burgeoning belief in the power of vulnerability. The bell rang, and the students erupted into the echoing hallways, a chaotic symphony of excitement. Feeling a surge of purpose, Rachel gathered the students' attention for the day's concluding activity. This time, she would invite them to reflect on their own stories, the challenges, the lessons, and the hope born from struggles. Let's create a garden of our own, she proposed, weaving her earlier metaphor into a tangible exercise. Rachel instructed them to think of a moment when they faced something difficult, and then to draw or write about how they navigated it. The room hushed, curiosity overtaking the initial exuberance. As they delved into their reflections, Rachel moved through the rows of desks, offering gentle guidance, planting questions that nudged deeper introspection. In the middle of her round, she came upon Mia, a quiet girl who struggled to find confidence in her voice. Today, however, she was scribbling fervently, her brow furrowed in concentration. Rachel knelt beside her, her heart swelling with anticipation. "What are you working on?" she asked softly. Mia looked up, her eyes brightened with enthusiasm. "I'm writing about how my grandmother passed away, but also how she taught me to appreciate the little things, like rainbows and butterflies." Rachel felt the warmth welling up in her chest. This was what she had hoped for, an emotional connection translating into empowerment. "That's beautiful, Mia. How do you think that will touch others?" Rachel pressed gently, encouraging her to make the connection with her classmates. Mia paused, her fingers hesitating over paper. "Maybe they won't feel alone when they learn that I've been sad too?" There was wisdom in her youthful reflection, a realization that Rachel couldn't have scripted better herself. As the class came to an end, a wave of elation washed over Rachel. The emotional exchanges had ignited a spirit of collaboration and empathy. Yet as the last student filed out, the pride was quickly overshadowed by the looming challenge ahead. How could she sustain this momentum against potential pushback from more cynical colleagues? Rachel spent the evening crafting a proposal for a meeting with the faculty. She knew she had to arm herself with research, statistics on how storytelling could foster emotional growth, and success stories from other schools. As she typed, she questioned the value of her experience against the academic theories. Was her intuition enough, or did she need to adhere strictly to conventional methods? Doubt clung to her like a fog as she hit send on her carefully constructed email. The moment was electric. Would they embrace her vision, or would she feel the weight of judgment again? As she sat back, her heart pounding, the stakes elevated in her own mind, Rachel realized that what stared back at her from the screen wasn't merely a proposal, but a manifestation of her desire for change. Just then, her phone buzzed, pulling her from contemplation. It was a message from Sarah. "I've been thinking. Can we chat further about your ideas? There's something intriguing about seeing students engage on this level." Flicker of hope ignited within Rachel. Yet, uncertainty still loomed. Could this be the breakthrough she sought, or merely another hurdle? As she prepared for a discussion that could either open up new pathways or erase her efforts, Rachel understood one thing profoundly. In the pursuit of growth, each conversation was an opportunity to redefine the narrative, both for herself and her students. With confidence buoying her, she felt the stirring of possibility begin to unfurl. The time had come to face the full weight of her mission. Would she have the strength to follow through on her bold desires, or would the fear of criticism retract her spirit? Rachel spent a sleepless night replaying the conversation with Sarah in her mind. The flickering fluorescent light above her desk cast shadows that danced in rhythm with her racing thoughts. She felt the weight of her ambition pressing down like a heavy blanket. As dawn broke, she rose from her chair, wrestling with uncertainty and determination. The morning sun streamed through her classroom windows, bathing the room in warmth and clarity. Today was the day of her meeting with the faculty. She meticulously organized her notes, ensuring that each point would resonate with her colleagues. The framed photos on the walls, reminders of success and laughter, reminded Rachel why she had embarked on this journey. Her heart fluttered with a mix of hope and dread as she gathered her materials. In the faculty lounge, the atmosphere buzzed with the chatter of educators discussing lesson plans and student needs. Rachel could feel the undercurrents of skepticism ripple through the air, and even the aroma of coffee couldn't tea masked the tensions that loomed. She took a deep breath and approached the assembly of teachers, each face a potential ally or adversary. "Thank you all for coming," Rachel began, her voice steady yet vulnerable. The initial shuffling quieted down, and she saw Sarah nodding, giving her a faint but reassuring smile. "I wanted to share my proposal on integrating storytelling techniques into our curriculum as a means of fostering emotional growth among students." She presented her research and examples, weaving through statistics and anecdotes that highlighted the transformative power of storytelling. As she spoke, she felt the thrill of her own narrative, the journey she and her students had embarked upon together. However, just as she could see a flicker of engagement in some colleagues' eyes, doubt crept in again. Would they respect her approach, or dismiss her as just another idealist? Then came the questions, harsh and piercing from the most cynical among them. How do you handle students who don't want to share their stories? What if they're too hurt or traumatized? Another questioned, arms crossed defensively. Rachel hesitated, a lump forming in her throat. She understood the weight of those questions. She had faced her own demons in the pursuit of vulnerability. That's valid. Not every student will be ready to share, and that's okay. The goal isn't about forcing a narrative, but creating a safe space to explore life's complexities, she asserted, finding strength in her voice as her message echoed in the room. The conversation shifted. Some educators began to nod, contemplating the value of empathy in their practices. But Rachel sensed others hesitant, resistant. Sounds great in theory, but how can we measure its effectiveness? One teacher interjected. The scrutinizing glare made Rachel's heart race anew. My hope is that we will be able to gather qualitative data through students' emotional responses and personal growth, she replied, her mind racing through possible solutions. They'll share their experiences, and we'll adapt as we learn together. Just then, She spotted Mia's drawing at the edge of her folder, colorful butterflies and rainbows that seemed to dance with joyous defiance. Sensing an opportunity, Rachel pointed it out, connecting it to the overarching conversation. Every student has a story worth telling, and by allowing them that platform we can foster resilience. Expectations hung thick in the air, and Rachel realized the narrative needed to evolve from her framing back to that of her students. Their voices were the heartbeat of her mission. The discussion morphed into a dialogue not merely about acceptance but about genuine engagement. As the meeting drew to a close, Rachel sensed cracks in the skepticism. Several colleagues approached her afterward, intrigued and inspired by her approach. Yet, she could still feel the weight of contention from others, a simmering doubt that threatened to resurface. Rachel prepared to leave, her heart buoyed by the seeds of possibility, yet aware that the battle was far from over. Her path forward remained shrouded in uncertainty. Would they come together to embrace this new approach, or would she face an uphill battle for the validation of her method? As she walked toward her classroom, determination surged within her. She was ready to cultivate the stories waiting to be told, but the real challenge would be in fostering an understanding of that power among those around her. One last thought lingered in her mind. How long could she keep her conviction burning bright in the face of potential backlash? Would she find the strength to navigate this transformative journey? Or would resistance extinguish her dreams before they could take root? As Rachel entered her classroom, the early afternoon sun poured in, splashing against the walls with a warmth that momentarily soothed her frazzled nerves. She set her folder down, heart still racing from the faculty meeting. Part of her felt victorious. The conversation had taken unexpected turns, and she had held her ground. Yet, lurking beneath that surface joy was a deep seam of doubt. Would her colleagues genuinely engage with her methodologies, or would they criticize behind her back? The thought gnawed at her. She paced, glancing at the whiteboard where she had scribbled key points of her proposal. The words seemed to taunt her, reminding her of the hurdles ahead. "Rachel, can I talk to you?" Mia's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. The slight tremor in her student's voice indicated something more serious lay beneath her inquiry. "Of course, Mia. Come in." Rachel gestured for her to sit, masking her tension behind a reassuring smile. Mia settled into one of the small chairs and took a deep breath. I wanted to tell you about something that happened yesterday." Rachel leaned in, intrigued. It was moments like these where she could witness the real impact of her teaching. "What is it?" "I was in the lunchroom and you know that kid, Jake? He's not really nice to me," she said, nervously fiddling with her drawing. "He made fun of my art, called it childish, and I felt terrible." Her voice wavered, eyes downcast. Rachel held her breath, sensing the significance of this moment. "What did you do?" "I remembered what you said about stories. Everyone has one, right? So, instead of getting mad at him, I told him some things about my drawings, how they make me feel and why I draw what I do. I even shared a story about my grandma." Mia's face lit up as she continued, her anxiety easing. The gentle smile tugging at Rachel's lips didn't match the turmoil within her. "And how did that go?" "He got quiet and listened, and then he said he thought it was cool that I could express those feelings through art." "I didn't expect that." Mia looked up, her eyes shimmering with resolve. "I wondered if maybe he has stories, too." Rachel felt a flicker of pride. Mia had transcended her pain and used vulnerability as a bridge instead of a barrier. "That's amazing, Mia. It sounds like you created a connection." Yet, a whisper of concern surged within her. Using her method might lead students to uncharted emotional territories. What if someone shares a story that's really painful? Mia's voice quaked, reminding Rachel of the weight that accompanied storytelling. What if they break down? Rachel contemplated the question, weighing her response carefully. It's true that stories can bring up tough feelings. This is why creating a safe environment is essential. It is a responsibility we all share, but it's also a chance for growth. Mia nodded, visibly processing Rachel's words. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the day, Rachel's mind raced with possibility. If Mia could be so profoundly affected, others would surely follow. But how would she guide those stories in a way that was respectful of each individual's boundaries? Would she each time be able to navigate the emotional weight of her students' experiences without losing her own path in the process? Rachel packed her belongings, the urgency of the impending challenges drumming in her heart. Working with Sarah and measuring success with broader indicators added layers of complexity to her vision. Still, Mia's breakthrough ignited a fierce conviction within her. As she stepped outside, the cool breeze met her eager face. Each step felt heavier, grounded in the reality that she must confront not only her colleagues' skepticism, but also emotional landscapes that could shatter her newfound ideals. Rachel stopped mid-stride, a realization crashing in. She had immersed herself in her proposal but hadn't considered her own story. What personal experiences could she share to create a deeper bond with her students? Could her vulnerability spark even greater growth for both her and them? The moment lingered, her breath caught in a rhythm of rising anticipation. It was time for her to confront her own narrative, to face the shadows she had carefully tucked away. The choice loomed before her. Would she unveil her own story to empower others, or retreat behind the safety of her teaching methods? Everything would hinge on the answer, and she felt an electric pulse of determination surge through her. The next chapter of her journey was about to unfold, one riddled with personal revelations and professional risks. What stories awaited her, both in the mirror and from the hearts of her students? The truth was just beyond her grasp, elevating the stakes higher than ever. Rachel's heart quickened with each step as she moved through the school hallways, the thrumming apprehension coiling tighter in her chest. What if exposing her vulnerabilities only led to criticism? For every student she hoped to inspire, there seemed to be an equivalent voice echoing doubts in her mind. Could she afford to strip away the protective layers of professionalism that had defined her thus far? She entered her classroom, the familiar scent of dry erase markers grounding her. The students were bustling with energy, some engaged in conversation while others were scanning their phones. She felt the weight of anticipation settle over her like a heavy blanket. The board still displayed Mia's artwork from yesterday, a testament to the power of storytelling she had witnessed. As the bell rang, the students settled into their seats, and Rachel took a moment to breathe the warmth from the afternoon sun, now felt like a spotlight, heightening her awareness of the choices ahead. Today, instead of diving straight into the lesson, she felt compelled to address something deeper. What if we start with sharing stories today? Rachel's voice broke through the chatter, and as silence rapidly enveloped the room, she sensed the blend of curiosity and skepticism facing her. Stories? Jake blurted out, a hint of disdain marking his expression. What's the point? The tension prickled. Here was her first test, the very student Mia had helped. Doubts tempted her to retreat, but the image of Mia's blossoming confidence fueled her resolve. Every one of us has a story that shapes who we are. I believe that sharing can help us understand each other better. She pressed, her voice steadying. Here's what we'll do. I'll go first. She chose to share a moment she had avoided, reflecting on a time in college when she had felt utterly lost, questioning her chosen path. As she described the turmoil of feeling misunderstood and the eventual break that led her toward teaching, she watched the students' expressions shift. Curiosity sparkled in their eyes, and she felt their walls begin to lower. Jake's demeanor altered, and Rachel caught him leaning forward, slightly interest-piqued. The story was a risk, but as she continued speaking, a warmth spread in her chest. Vulnerability had not broken her. It opened a door to connection. When she finished, she gave them the space to reflect before inviting anyone who felt comfortable to share their own experiences. To her surprise, several hands rose, a ripple of authenticity transforming the atmosphere. Each student spoke of their struggles, fears, and small victories, culminating into a communal narrative that echoed in the classroom. Mia spoke again, this time more assuredly. I was scared to tell my story, but hearing you, I see when we share our experiences, we give each other strength. Her voice shone with a newfound fervor. The classroom, once a mere space for learning, had morphed into a sanctuary for unguarded hearts. Rachel stood humbled before them, the collective sharing igniting a flicker of inspiration within her. But amid the warmth, a shadow beckoned at the edges of her mind. How far could this method push her? What if someone shared something so intense it trapped them in darkness? Was she equipped to help them navigate it? The lesson had sparked passion and connection, but resentment may bubble just below the surface. Would her colleagues understand this transformative shift she initiated, or would they condemn it as a misguided risk? As the class ended, Rachel glanced at the open door, inviting her into an uncertain horizon. Her risk had blossomed into a symbiotic exchange of vulnerability, but she knew the challenges ahead were as potent as any story shared. Stepping outside, she felt both invigorated and anxious. She must reinforce the safe space established today while preparing for the potential fallout or support from her peers. Would she continue to confront her own discomfort, or would she succumb to the fears that lurked within? Newly awakened determination coursed through her. She needed to explore how Mia and others would sustain this emotional growth. Tomorrow loomed larger, promising further revelations. Rachel realized that navigating her colleagues' perceptions might be the next vital story that needed telling. Hers was only the beginning. With the sunset painting the sky vivid colors, Rachel headed home, filled not with the comfort of certainty, but the invigorating challenge of the unknown. Tomorrow might unveil the most formidable conflicts yet, igniting a reckoning not only within her students but within herself as well. Would she be prepared for the truth that awaited her both personally and professionally? The next morning, Rachel awoke to a heavy fog that hung outside her window, mirroring the uncertainty swirling within her. In the silence of her small apartment, thoughts churned, filled with snippets from yesterday's exchange. The way vulnerability turned her classroom into an unexpected haven. But self-doubt crept in, and what if that sanctuary was merely a mirage? Would its foundations withstand scrutiny from her colleagues? She dressed with automatic movements, the day's agenda now pulsing in her mind like an unyielding tick of a clock. With each sip of coffee, she rehearsed responses to potential questions. What if this approach undermines academic rigor? What if students become overly dependent on emotional sharing? She took a deep breath, trying to summon the courage that had bloomed the day before. Rachel arrived earlier than usual, the school still shrouded in silence. The mundanity of the halls offered a stark contrast to the vibrant discussions from the previous day. She set her belongings down on her desk, glancing at the board still adorned with Mia's artwork, an emblem of the strength she had invited into her classroom. The day passed through a haze of anticipation, and soon that silence shattered as her students entered. Their chatter felt different today, lighter, with an underlying current of familiarity. "Are we going to share stories again?" Mia asked, her face alight with eagerness. Rachel's heart swelled at the prospect. "Yes, but let us do something a bit different." A spark of idea flared within her mind. What if we each write a gratitude note first? Think about someone who has had a positive impact on your life and how that connection shaped you. Skepticism flickered in some eyes, but curiosity quickly followed. As the students transferred their thoughts onto paper, Rachel felt an unexpected thrill. This was a nurturing challenge, prompting them to appreciate connections, fostering self-reflection that transcended past vulnerabilities. As she walked the aisles, she overheard snippets of conversation. "I never thought about how much Dad supports me," whispered one student. Another mused, "Ms. Harris, can I write about a teacher from the past?" Rachel's pulse quickened. These interactions sparked a realization. Sharing gratitude was akin to storytelling, but wrapped in the safety of appreciation, an invaluable lesson in recognizing support without the threat of judgment. Once they finished, Rachel turned her attention to the class. Instead of sharing this note directly with that person, let us transform them into stories. Moments later, the room was filled with voices recounting tales woven with gratitude rather than pain. This shift cast an ethereal decoration over the classroom, assuring Rachel that moments of vulnerability, wrapped in positivity, could foster deeper connections. Jake stood up, nervously fidgeting with his note. After hesitating, he began to speak. "I wrote about my brother. He has always pushed me to try new things, even if it's crazy like art." The sincerity in his voice was palpable, and an aura of calm blanketed the room as they listened with genuine interest. As classes ended, Rachel felt a nagging doubt seep into her thoughts again. This was a simple exercise, yet what if it exposed deeper issues? Could focusing on gratitude provide the necessary emotional resilience for their unfolding stories? Her heart raced at the uncertainty, a mix of fear and determination pushing her to think 2 steps ahead. Would her own vulnerabilities be further laid bare if challenges arose? She knew that sustaining this level of emotional mapping among the students was crucial, but it needed balance. Supporting their growth and navigating her own evolving feelings felt like a tightrope walk without a safety net. As the final bell rang, Rachel felt a sense of urgency surging within her. It was clear that her approach worked, but it also demanded her to extend beyond mere pedagogy, deepening her own emotional investment. The true lesson wasn't about sharing. It was about transformation. Would she embrace the full kaleidoscope of her experiences and instincts, trusting the process? With uncertainty swirling like the fog outside, she stepped into the hall, her mind racing. Tomorrow would require her to not only nurture her students' emotional growth, but also to confront how deeply intertwined her professional self had become with her personal journey. The moment lingered, heavy and pulsating, and she recalled the warmth of yesterday's unity. But this flicker of hope came with questions that begged to be answered. Would she have the resilience to lead both herself and her students toward an often painful but essential truth? As Rachel looked around her classroom the next morning, the excitement was palpable. The previous day's gratitude exercise had transformed the atmosphere, and the lingering energy from those heartfelt stories felt like spring blooming after a long winter. She stood before her students, ready to embrace another day. They had opened a door, and she was determined to walk through it together. Despite the nervous flutter in her stomach, Rachel felt steadied by the intent focus of her class. Today we're continuing this journey, but we're doing it a bit differently. She paused, taking a moment to gauge their reactions. I want you to think back to those stories of gratitude and reflect on how they have shaped who you are. As they settled into their reflections, Rachel could feel the weight of her own journey pressing down on her. She had explored narratives with her students, but she still hadn't unleashed her own story, the one that held the power to demonstrate how her challenges had molded her resilience. Rachel wrestled with the decision, her heart pounding with uncertainty and excitement. Should she finally reveal her truth? Leaning into her vulnerability, she took a deep breath and decided, I want to share a story from my life, too, she announced, feeling the courage build inside her. It's about how I learned to find strength in unexpected places, through loss and love. The classroom was enveloped in silence as Rachel began. She spoke of Jake with a clarity that felt liberating, how his absence had carved an aching void that had once consumed her, and how her journey through grief had unfolded into the empowerment of teaching and sharing stories. As her words flowed, she could see something shift in her students' faces, a recognition that they, too, could navigate their own losses and fears. Rachel shared how she had often felt overwhelmed by doubt, particularly when the world seemed to expect her to mask her vulnerabilities rather than embrace them. But through teaching, she continued, her heart racing, I've realized that our stories can connect us, heal us, and help us grow. When she finished, she felt raw yet exhilaratingly liberated. The class sat in hushed reverence, reflecting on the power of authenticity that had sparked between them. Mia stood up slowly, a light growing in her eyes. Miss Rachel, I didn't realize you went through something so hard. Thank you for telling us. Before Rachel could respond, another student chimed in, That's brave. We can do this together. The warmth enveloped the room like a hug, affirming her courage. Rachel's pulse raced. This was it. She had opened a door not just for herself but for her students as well. Vulnerability shone a light on their interconnected journeys. She realized that these moments of sharing had catalyzed not only emotional support but a transformative learning experience for all. As the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Rachel felt a sense of accomplishment suffuse through her. The conversations they had fostered weren't mere emotions. They were lessons in resilience, vulnerability, and, most importantly, gratitude. But the true test awaited her as she faced her colleagues later that day. Would they embrace her methodology and the changes her students had experienced, or would they resist it altogether? Entering the faculty lounge, Rachel felt the familiar tension in the air. Now equipped with certainty fueled by her experience, Rachel addressed the team with newfound confidence. I want to report back on how integration of storytelling techniques has impacted our students. They're engaging deeply and sharing their experiences, which cultivates not only empathy but resilience. As she outlined her observations and success stories from the classroom, Rachel recognized that she was no longer standing behind her proposal. She was commanding respect through lived experience. Some colleagues listened intently while others furrowed their brows, unsure. Yet even the skeptics seemed softened by the very essence of her journey, a testament to what vulnerability could achieve. Within a community, as discussions unfolded, Rachel was met with thoughtful inquiries rather than pointed critiques. Over time, the dialogues shifted from skepticism to collaboration, and her heart soared as she witnessed a collective pivot among her peers. By the end of the meeting, Rachel felt empowered not just as a teacher, but as an active participant in reshaping educational narratives. Her colleagues began to engage with storytelling methodologies, contemplating their own approaches and how they could foster deeper connections amongst their students. Rachel's heart brimmed with pride, and her spirit felt buoyed. The risks she had taken had forged not just pathways for her students, but bridges for cohesion within her entire school community. As she walked home that evening, the sun setting low on the horizon, she reflected on her transformation. Rachel had not only confronted her fears but had also shown what it meant to challenge the norms of teaching. Vulnerability had merged with strength, and as she shared her truth, she had forged powerful connections. Tomorrow promised to be another day of growth and discovery, both for her and for her students. Rachel had embraced her challenges, transforming them into stories that illuminated the path forward. She felt a profound wave of satisfaction fill her being, an unmistakable understanding that change, a true transformation, began within. Now was the time for her to step boldly into a future filled with possibility. You need to subscribe now to witness more emotional stories and transformations. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Rachel's journey to personal growth. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to be part of this empowering community.